Well, welcome to Lost in Livy. It's good to have you with us. I'm here to interview Lost in Livy about Lost in Livy. Welcome, Lost in Livy. Thanks for setting it up. I'm always good for a giggle. So you set up the channel Lost in Livy to highlight, and certainly initially, to highlight the wonderful path network in Livingston. Tell us a wee bit how it comes about. The road network in Livingston was set up. Livingston was a new town developed by Livingston Development Corporation, which was set up to develop the town over a period of, I think, about 35 years was the existence of that. And this started out with what was essentially an area of agricultural land. And this agricultural land was really covered by small farm settlements and a couple of villages, one of which was the village of Livingston itself. And all of those communities were connected by paths and roadways and byways and what have you. When the new town developers came along to look at where they were going to set out their new road network, they decided to set out a series of communities based on those existing settlements. And they set out a network of kind of circular roads, district roads, which would circulate around each of the areas. But they decided to retain the original, the pre-existing path network. And where that old network and the new network came into conflict, they would build underpasses. In most cases, there are 7 or 8 overbridges where an underpass couldn't really easily be built. But the majority of these intersections were covered by means of an underpass, where the pre-existing path would pass under this new road network that was being built. I guess one way of looking at it is that they created a completely traffic-free network for walking, cycling, wheeling as we call it nowadays. And that was separate from a road network developed for interference-free motor vehicle traffic. So you could drive around Livingston without coming into conflict with crossing points, with junctions. You had roundabouts instead of junctions. There weren't even traffic lights when Livingston was first developed. I think they came sometime possibly in the 90s. So you had this network set up of paths with quite a large number of underpasses. So the road network was constructed separate from the retained path network by using underpasses, and you cycle all over Livingston quite regularly. Yeah, I use the path network all the time. I mean, I get around Livingston, probably 95% of the journeys I make in Livingston are on a bike. I try to avoid driving. I've only got a camper van, but I try to avoid driving the van in the town. It's, for one thing, it's inefficient. For another thing, it pumps out all these fumes and gases and what have you that aren't harmful to health and harmful to the planet. So I guess you must know how many underpasses there are. You know, I've never really counted how many underpasses there are. I don't know the answer to that. You don't? I do now. I know how many underpasses there are now, but I'm keeping that a secret for the moment. So tell us how you went about it. How did you start off? You must have had a definition you must have had to define the boundaries of Livingston New Town. Yeah, well, I took, it is difficult to find in a modern map to find a boundary around Livingston. There will be somewhere, but I've gone back to maps that existed during the Livingston Development Corporation's days, and I've got this Livingston Street Plan dated March 1980, and on the back of this is a progress plan which kind of outlines the boundary of the new town as it was defined for development purposes. And so I've used that. That is what I've used to define the boundary within which I'm counting underpasses. Okay, and what about how do you define an underpass? I mean, an underpass could be one path going under another, or path going under a railway line, for instance. There must be a couple of these in Livingston. Well, underpasses, there are lots of ways of defining an underpass. I'm quite specifically looking at a road carrying vehicular traffic over a path that can be used for walking or cycling, the path going under that road. I'm not going to count paths that go under the railway. There are a couple of railway bridges with pathways going under that, but that is not going to be into my definition. I found one underpass that was never built, so I'm not counting that. And I'm not counting an underpass as being a pathway or a roadway that passes under one of the footbridges, one of the overbridges. There are a couple of those within Livingston where one path passes under another path. That's an underpass, but it's not the underpass that I'm counting for this video. Okay, so we're looking at the new town boundary as it was as it was defined for Livingston Development Corporation. Okay, that's the first definition. And an underpass we're defining as being a path which passes under a roadway carrying vehicular traffic. Okay, that's fine. So there must be quite a few bits and pieces of that. So how did you go about it? Well, I started off with a map. I've got a good idea, and one of the best maps around just now for Livingston and for the whole of West Lothian is this cycle map that's produced by Spokes, which is an Edinburgh-based cycle campaign. They do this fantastic map, and the most recent map at the moment is a 2018 map, which is pretty up to date, and it's not too bad. So along with my own knowledge and just using the map, looking over the map and trying to decide, ours is a map, I set out I kind of defined areas that I would look at one at a time, or try to do one at a time, sort of loosely based on the districts of the town. And then I got on my bike and I rode round them, recording a video clip each time I passed through an underpass. And when you went cycling around, so did you divided it up into areas? So was it a case of just you got on your bike, cycled round that one area, and that was it? Well, you think you're completed, and then you suddenly find that you're not. I mean, for instance, I just finished the Craigs Hill area, and I thought I'd got it all. I've circled all the underpasses as I've added them into the video, and I've circled them and I've gone round it and looked at it carefully, looked at it a couple of times, and lo and behold, there's one I've missed. Yeah, I suppose you always do miss out a few, yeah. So how did you go about the process? So the video editing process I had to be fairly particular about it. I'd recorded clips really just as I rode through the underpass. There's one that I had to walk through because it's just not suitable anymore for cycling. It never was. It's very overgrown, so I sort of walked through. That was the Killandine path, the original path for Killandine Burn. But yeah, I would, as I say, I downloaded my file onto the computer, obviously. Then I would go through each clip that I'd recorded. I would tag it with the area, and then I would label it with the road and where the underpass was going through, where it was heading towards, or which of there are 24 core paths in Livingston. I would name it by one of the paths if it was. And then I would as I added each clip into the timeline in the video, I would mark it off on my map. So I would put a wee circle around it, and that gives me a sort of double check. So I could then go through each area and check that I hadn't duplicated anything. I could go back to the map and I could go around it. And as I say, just recently I found when I haven't gone through Craigs Hill and I thought I'd done it so perfectly, I discovered there was one that I'd left out. So, I have to go back to do it again. That's really interesting. And so now we know how many underpasses are in Livingston. We do indeed. And we're going to tell the viewer. I don't think we should tell them. Let them count it for themselves. Do you really want to know how many underpasses there are in Livingston? Yeah, we'll put the number in at the end. Yeah, I think so too. We should leave this for you to find out. There's a clip compilation coming up. There's one clip for every underpass, and we do mean every underpass in Livingston. See if you can count them. We'll tell you at the end how many there are. Thanks for watching. Lost in Livi. Truly lost in Livi. Yeah, it's been fun doing it.